Hello everyone. So it's time for the answers to your questions. You've left so many on the community tab post and under the videos. Thank you very, very much for your interest. I tried to compile them and I think I have all of them. If there's one that I overlooked, just repost it in the comments and I'll be happy to give you an answer there. And Mishka's also just joined us after she's been sleeping for the last hour next to the heater. But apparently she can tell that we're recording, so she came here. Alright, so I got some Regency romance paper. So we have some cute designs that we can go through while we look at the questions. And you can see there's quite a lot of them. So I'll have to give you some shorter answers just to some of these to make sure that we get through all of them. Right, so one of the questions that turned up pretty often was about my job that I have outside of YouTube and whether I'm a historian or a linguist or a teacher, or I think someone mentioned translator. Like I said before, none of those things. I basically work in customer service and I like my job. I do think there are some similarities to what I do here, which is basically just being friendly to people. I think there's a similarity, but it has nothing to do with languages or history. The other question that goes with that is whether I went to university and what I studied. I did go to university and I have a degree in international communication, basically. So some language background, but not a linguist per se. And I don't have a degree in English literature or the like. And this one's been popping up for a while as well. Am I planning on doing a face reveal at some point? And unfortunately, I have to disappoint you. Probably not. I might change my mind at some point and maybe post a picture on Instagram or something. But for now, I'd rather keep it like that and sort of keep a little anonymity with this channel. Maybe it's just because I'm a geriatric millennial and we were socialized a little differently. I remember when we got internet at home, I was told not to share anything about myself, just pick a pseudonym and stick to that. And if things have really changed in the meantime, but I guess that has just stuck with me. Yeah, and I feel a bit safer doing it like this. All right, there are some more, little more personal questions towards the end, but I figured I would put these to the front about the setup for filming that we have. I often get the question whether the second camera here on the side is automatic, but it's not. Someone's actually standing there and operating their camera. Then we have a second static one up there. The microphone's to the left and the light is over there on the right hand side. It's a bit of a small space here. We had a second light before that doesn't really fit in here. So we just make do with the environment that we have. And someone also asked about what we do if there's some background noise. You know, do we cut that out? And the answer is yes, we do. the raw material that we're filming is usually about 5 minutes longer than what you get to see. So it's just really short bits that get cut out. Like sometimes I lose the thread and don't remember what I wanted to say, or I have to look up a word. Somewhere over there in the wall is a pipe that you sometimes hear. Over there to the left is a door in the yard that sometimes slams shut. So these are bits where we just pause and then repeat the sentence, and then there's a little cut that apparently is very well disguised. Alright, then there was a couple questions about how I choose, prepare and organize the structure of a topic, and how long it takes me to prepare it, especially for something like history or a language video. So in terms of picking a topic, it used to be a bit easier. I would just go through some books that I had, looked at a map that looked interesting, and then looked up some information. So it was a bit more spontaneous at the time. In the meantime, I have a list that just goes on and on and on of topics that have been requested, or maps that I've received from either you or from friends and family, things that I've thrifted, and all kinds of stuff that I want to go through. And sometimes things come up during the seasons. Like, for example, when we talked about the poetry that's part of the music here, I got this for Christmas and I just figured it would make a great topic for a video, so I picked that for the occasion. I try to kind of structure the months so there isn't too much of the same in a row. Like if there's a history video, I try to mix that with a map video or maybe a completely different topic. So it just, you have a nice mix every month. I hope I'm succeeding at that. In terms of preparation, someone asked whether I read through all the books, for example. I don't. I count about a day for one topic. If it's something where I need to look up a bit more, I have to count like 2 days. But a book will still be too much to get through. So basically what I do is I go on Wikipedia, I open one tab, and then I just click through on every link that I find. And in the end, I have like 10, 15 tabs, and I skim through those and look up information that I think would be relevant for a video. And the structure then basically just develops itself out of what I see on a map, what I find interesting, and from the information that I find on Wikipedia. Obviously, if there's something that is wrong on Wikipedia, it's probably going to make it into my video, because I don't always have time to fact check everything, and there's just, by now there are quite many topics that I don't have much background info on, so I just have to rely on whoever edits these Wikipedia articles. And I can also show you what my notes look like. So, for example, these were my notes for the video on the languages in Mesoamerica. I used some colors for this one to make it a bit easier to read along. Sometimes I just also kind of take really quick notes, mostly names, dates, numbers, anything that's hard to memorize quickly, or something that you can get wrong. I don't always use all the information that I write down. For example, here with the last video on the Great Lakes, I don't think I mentioned any of these parts here about how Lake Ontario was initially part of the Atlantic Ocean, and the Earth is actually rising now that the weight of the glaciers has disappeared. So I just, try to put everything interesting here, and then some bits don't make it into the video, but I feel like as long as there's a nice flow through the video, that's okay. It's not about cramming absolutely everything into 30 minutes. And I don't necessarily have a fixed structure either. I do usually practice these videos and just go through them a couple of times, talk through certain elements of it. But then I do prefer to just speak freely. I think that works better for an actual video and is nicer to listen to. Right. And there were a couple questions about my map collection. When did I start it? Where do I find these maps and books? And do I keep them, or do I send them on a journey afterwards? So honestly, I started my map collection halfway through running this channel. I didn't have one beforehand. And I've actually had to buy a second bookshelf to make some room for all of these books and maps that I've amassed. I do keep a lot of them, but by now I think I'll have to let some go. Like, for example, I once asked my neighbors whether they have any old maps they don't need anymore. And I have so many of them now. I don't think there's really a point in keeping all of them. And like I said, I'm also borrowing from friends and family. I'm thrifting a lot. Sometimes finding old books in these little book boxes where neighbors leave them. So yeah, just anywhere around me. And then 2 questions were about specific topics, whether there are going to be more videos with bullet journals and border magazines. As for the border magazines, which were the ones with the sewing patterns, I have used all the magazines that I took from my grandma last time. And I think the ones that she has now are all a bit newer. I can have a look whether I can find something older. I figured something like fashion magazines or pop culture magazines could be quite nice to look through. But I'll just have to go thrifting at some point and haven't come around to doing that. With the bullet journals, I might do an occasional update, kind of like with the vinyl collection every couple months. But I feel like I've shared most of my tips with you, so I'm not sure what other tips I can give you. I'll have to do some research first. All right. Then we have a couple of questions about ASMR. The first one is whether I remember the first time I experienced ASMR as a kid. I do. I think I was about 12 when I got home from school, and I was alone at the time. So I picked some chocolate instead of lunch and sat down in front of the TV and did some channel hopping. And I landed on the shopping channel where someone was selling jewelry. And I remember they had this really specific way of talking about all the little details of the jewelry and the offers that they had, and how much you could save and what a good deal it was, while showing all of the little details. And I just completely melted. It was great. And I tried a couple times afterwards to watch a shopping channel, but it was never the same. I think it was just that specific person and their way of talking. And I remember I mentioned it, I think, to my grandmother at one point, who must have thought that it was quite weird that you're 12-year-old granddaughter starting to watch a shopping channel. But she said they're just like trained to talk that specific way. So it was really interesting. It kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I've also looked for shopping channel role plays on different ASMR channels. But yeah, it was never the same. It was a one-off experience. When did I discover ASMR, and which creators do I watch for relaxation or for inspiration? So I discovered ASMR, I think over 10 years ago, so pretty much when it started. I think I saw a comment on ONTD back then. Do let me know if you remember ONTD. Where they thought it was pretty weird, and I think they shared a video of someone with like a ramen package with all the noodles under the plastic, and someone was just squeezing the plastic. And I had a really strong reaction to it. Like I almost got a headache from it because it was so tingly. And I spent a lot of time watching ASMR after that. I think I watched most of the creators that were active back then. Like I also regularly searched for new videos. I've really liked Veni Vidi Vulpes, for example, especially the video with the dominus. I love that one. Then Equine Cutie with the hospitality basket. Really like that. There was I think her name's Abby from ASMR Requests with she had some science fiction role plays. I think it was called Departure. I love that one. And it took a really long time to realize that halfway through the video, another creator turns up feather, because I was just always asleep by then. But that was amazing and just so well done. Really like that. But yeah, kind of just clicked on pretty much everything. And there are a lot of creators who I feel like I wish I had taken notes somewhere, because I don't remember all the different videos and creators I watched. For inspiration, the one creator that really motivated me to start this channel was the French Whisperer, also because of his specific setup and how he narrates his stories, which I think is very quite obvious from the setup that we have. So he was a huge inspiration. And then I don't know whether I wrote that down now. So someone asked also what kind of creators I watch today, and I have to admit I watch very little ASMR by now. Maybe it's just that this has kind of become a bit of a job. But I'm more fond of unintentional ASMR now, and more drawn to podcasts or series. For example, I sometimes get tingles from the X-Files, like especially from the way Scully speaks. I love that. But there's very little in terms of YouTube videos that I watch. I think the last creator where I watched a couple of videos was Atmosphere. And I watched Latte ASMR for a bit, but that's about it. And you know, because you guys rightfully mentioned it would be great to find more ASMR artists through this Q&A. So my suggestion is leave your recommendations in the comments, and if you have a channel, please also put it in the comments. I think everyone would love to find more great creators to watch. So I'll just leave that here as a reminder. And I'll pin a comment at the top. You can reply under that, or just leave an extra comment. Right, then there's the question: when I decided to start my channel, and whether my friends and family know about it and what they think about it. I think the first time I thought about starting a channel actually was like 10 years ago, and I'm a bit sad I didn't go through with it. But all I had at the time was a really small netbook with a really bad camera, so I don't know how good of a product I would have been able to make. For this channel, I wanted to start it at the start of 2020 together with a friend who's also into ASMR and who has some experience with media creation, making videos. And she said she knows someone who'd also be interested in running a YouTube channel. She has microphones, cameras, equipment, knows how to edit. And we actually set up a date for filming a test video, which went great. And that was, I think, end of February 2020. And we said, okay, we'll meet again in a month and record an actual video. And yeah, obviously that didn't happen. And it was just really difficult to organize any day where we all had time to come together again and record something. And at some point I talked to this nice man here on my left about it, who said, wait, I have cameras, I have a microphone, I can edit it, let's do it. And so here we are. And that was in summer 2020, and we started filming pretty much straight away. And yeah, it's been a pretty one great thing that's come out of that year. And my friends and family do know about it because I'm bad at shutting up about things I'm excited about. And I kind of shared all the screenshots of the first subscribers, and when I got to 100 subscribers for Christmas and then 150 for New Year's, and I was really happy about that. Some who don't know ASMR have some difficulty understanding what exactly it is that I do. So I've started explaining it as I make videos to fall asleep to, because one person then just typed ASMR into YouTube and was a bit bewildered by the first results that they got. So I think it's easier to say it's just for falling asleep. Some also do watch it. You know, some people like ASMR anyway, and so they've watched my videos too. They've all given me very nice feedback. One friend said afterwards she wasn't sure about how successful it was going to be, but she never mentioned it until we actually got a lot of subscribers, so that was very kind of her. And I also got some feedback from my mom, because my mom is a big fan. She thinks the channel is sensational, in her words. And she sent me a very nice message saying, when I was little, she would read me goodnight stories, sometimes up to an hour. And now when she can't sleep, she watches one of my videos. And she always seems to be really amazed that it does work and she really does fall asleep. So that's pretty great. And she also does recommend it to other people. And she sometimes reads through your comments too. And she's very happy with how kind everyone is. Alright, so much for ASMR. And then we have a couple questions about languages, which I've put together here. Actually 3 questions were about why my English is so good. Thank you. And then how many languages I speak, any more that I'd like to learn, and how I know so much about languages. So I learned English at school like everyone else, but I think the difference is that after school I had a partner from England who did know German but couldn't understand my dialect at the time, because I was speaking dialect. And I figured, well, I don't want to speak standard German, let's just switch to English. And we use English pretty much all the time. And the interesting thing was that our friends group was also like either half native speakers, and have Austrians who would also switch to English then. And there's something that happens really often in Austria. If you are an English native speaker who comes here to learn German, you have to be really insistent because people will switch to English the moment they hear an accent in how you talk. But it's great for practicing. All the movies, series that we watched were in English. I used English a lot in my job. I spent a lot of time in English online communities. So I think for 2 or 3 years I was at a point where English actually felt like the dominant language in my life rather than German. And when I had to write a German text, I sometimes caught myself trying to translate certain expressions from English into German, which was a bit of an odd experience. It's since switched back, and I feel like German is the main language again in my life, but they really made a huge impact. So my suggestion, if you're trying to get a language to proficiency level, is really to find someone you can have conversations with in that language and just talk as much as possible. I really think that was the biggest help that I had. Like, it's great to watch movies or read books, but actually using a language in a conversation, for me, always helps the most in improving it. Yeah, how many languages do I speak? I would say 3, German, English, and French. But of course, I've started learning a lot of languages. I'm also learning Norwegian at the moment. I had courses in Italian, in Turkish, and 1 course or 2 courses in Russian. But that's all beginner level. And I will be honest, anymore I would love to learn all the languages. Like, my list on Duolingo is very, very, very long. But I think it's best to just focus on the ones I've already started and try to get them to a better level before I start something new. And how do I know so much about languages? Partly, I think I don't. Like, it's just my notes that I've taken from Wikipedia. Like languages in Mesoamerica, it's honestly all I know about it is what I told you about it. But I did once have a teacher who said, once you've learned one language, it's a lot easier to learn a second one or a third one because you know how it works and you've encountered certain, for example, grammar structures that then might be familiar in the next language that you learn. So it actually gets easier, even if it doesn't always feel that way. But you can kind of build on what you've learned in one language. All right. Then there were some questions about traveling. What's the favorite destination that I've been to, and is there somewhere I'd really like to visit in the future? I can give you a quick answer on the second one. I would love to go to Sicily in winter. I've been wanting to go there for 2 or 3 years now and just never managed to book the trip. But I think Sicily generally would be a really interesting place. And then especially in winter with the lemon harvest, and it's a bit lighter there than here, it would be great. And maybe I'll manage next year. As for favorite destinations, I don't know if I have one favorite place. I really liked my trip to Oslo last year. That was magical. But I also really like France. I don't think I've ever had a bad day in Italy. So I've been pretty happy with all the places I visited. And then someone also asked whether I have any tips for people who maybe haven't traveled a lot. And to be honest, I think it looked last year like I'm traveling a lot, but I usually do short trips. mostly city trips and usually close by. I haven't done any long distance traveling. But if there's one tip I would give you is you probably need less stuff than you think. Like, you can travel lightly as long as you have the most important things with you, like passport, wallet, charger, any documents that you need. Anything else, if there's really an emergency or you really forgot something, you can get it there. And most of the time, you need a lot less than you would expect. But if you have any tips for a person who'd like to travel more, do write them in the comments. I think they would be very appreciated. Then the next question is whether I was born in Vienna and would have lived here all my life. I haven't. I was actually born in Upper Austria and I grew up with Upper Austrian dialect. I got some very nice comments, especially in the German videos, about my Viennese accent. And I always feel a bit weird about it because I don't think I sound Viennese. I do use some Viennese expressions by now because I've been here for almost 20 years, which feels incredibly long. But I still think I sound Upper Austrian, really. Which is also why I'm so attached to the lakes in Upper Austria. Okay, some people wanted to know more about Mishka. How long have I known her and is she my only pet? So I got Mishka pretty much exactly 3 years ago. I think it was at the end of the first lockdown. And I picked her up from the shelter. And all they could tell me is that she'd been found roaming the streets of one of the outer districts. So they didn't really know anything about her, nor her age, not where she'd been before, no name, no medical history. They said that she looked healthy and she was probably about 4 years old. So we've been to a lot of vets in the meantime. And they all agree that she's at least 10, so that would make her 13 by now. And yeah, she's a bit of an expensive cat. We have a handle on it now, but she has a food allergy, and just figuring out what she can eat, what she will eat, what kind of medication she needs, that really took quite a long time. But I feel like once you pick up a pet, you're responsible, and obviously I try to take care of her as best as I can. And she is my only pet, and normally I try to have cats in pairs. So I actually picked her up because I had to put another cat to sleep, who I loved very much, but she was 16, so a very old lady. And the second cat I had at the time was a bit of a weirdo. He was from a hoarding situation, so they'd had a lot of cats in an apartment. And I always had the impression that even though he warmed up to me and, I think he trusted me, he always tended to look to the other cat to figure out whether the situation was safe, whether he could come out, etc. And so I figured he would probably want another cat friend. And it turns out he didn't. They didn't like each other at all. I think he thought that she was an intruder. She thought he was a complete weirdo and a creep, which, true. And yeah, in the end, the other cat got very sick as well, and I had to put him to sleep. And I figured I could get a second cat for Mishka. But since it took so long to figure the whole health situation out, in the end, I thought maybe it's easier to just keep her on her own. She looks happy, so I think she's okay with it. And sometimes she goes to visit some neighbors, and I think that makes up for being an only cat. All right, where are my rings from? So unfortunately, I can't give you any links on where they're from because I mostly don't remember where I bought them or who I bought them from. Like this one here, I got at the Africa Festival a couple of years ago from a stall that had lots of different jewelry, but I don't remember the name they had. Same is true for this one. This is from a Christmas market. Then this one, and this one I bought this year at the Christmas market. I went a bit overboard. And I'm actually missing one. I don't know where I got this one. But this little stone here, and one that's similar to this, I got in Norway. There was a little street market where I stayed, the first one after the pandemic, and so I got some rings there. I'll try and remember next time I buy one to take note where I got it from. But yeah, most of them are recent purchases. I feel like with the channel I have a reason to buy nail polish and rings. Okay, and then we're getting to the final questions. This one's really difficult. Who has inspired and motivated you in life, and do you have any role models? I think someone also asked about whether I have a favorite philosopher. I can't give you an answer on that. But the people who've inspired me the most are usually people that were directly in my life. Like some friends who were just such a positive force. And not necessarily because everything in their life went perfectly or they were super happy all the time. But they were just really, I don't know, they knew how to motivate others and engage them, and were so outgoing and friendly. One person, for example, who I met about 10 years ago, when I wasn't doing so well, sent me links to Duolingo, for example, which at the time, there wasn't even an app, it was just in the browser. Or to some yoga channels, so we could both practice yoga and tell us about it. One of those yoga channels was Yoga with Adrienne, which I think was during the first year. It's a completely new channel. I don't know how she was so up to date with everything. I don't know how they were so up to date with everything, but I learned a lot. Just also about structuring your day-to-day life, how to figure out what makes yourself feel happier and better. And that's really, really stuck with me. And in terms of public figures, I was reminded of this movie that I watched 4 years ago, so just before the pandemic, called Die Donau, of the first Minister for Women's Affairs that we had in Austria. Hugely influential person. And I always find it wild to look back at like the laws in the 70s, 80s, and how that affected the people in my family as well, and how different my own life would look. So that's someone I hugely admire. And then I just saw this question this morning, whether I have a favorite album. Again, a question I find very difficult. I can tell you I have a favorite band. I've talked about them before. They're called Rottenkreis. They're a metal band from Greece. And you can see that I have a couple of their albums. This is the first one that I bought. It looks like it's seen better times, but it's just, I was a teenager. I dragged this with me everywhere. Absolutely loved it. And I've listened to it so often. I feel like I still know every single song by heart. Really, really like it. This is probably my second favorite album by them, called Theogonia. And they use a lot of mythology as inspiration for their songs. So there are some things I didn't know about before that I thought were really interesting. Yeah, they're a great band. I like them very, very much. And I just saw today that they're playing in Austria this year, so I think I'll go and organize my ticket after we're done filming. Okay, and then this is the last card. I put 2 questions on here. One is about my ideal 3-course meal. I think my ideal 3-course meal is a 5-course meal. I can't really pick specific dishes, but as long as it's vegetarian and if there's like a little surprise element, maybe in terms of texture, then I'll be very happy. And it's the historical period that I feel particularly drawn to and why. You probably noticed that I like doing videos about the Middle Ages. I feel like the Middle Ages are interesting because on one hand, it's so far in the past that there's a lot of distance there, which I think is great for ASMR. But on the other hand, it's also close enough that you can find some surprising connections. You can still find traces of the Middle Ages. People already spoke not the German that I speak today, but they spoke a form of German. They didn't live in the Austria that I live in today, but there was something like a place that was called Austria. So, like that mix of distant past, but then also traces you can still find in your everyday life. I find that really interesting. And speaking of the Middle Ages, one part I also found very fascinating. When we learn about history in school, they kind of always taught us like these blocks. Like, okay, there's ancient Egypt, there's ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and then there's the Middle Ages. And the way that I was taught was that antiquity lasted until about 500, and then 500 to 1500 is the Middle Ages. And I always figured, what if you live in the year 500? Like, do you feel like you're living in antiquity? Do you feel like you're living in the Middle Ages? Are you wearing a toga, or are you sitting in a monastery copying books by candlelight? It felt like I had 2 completely different pictures of what life would have been like. And so that period of moving from one sort of block, as I would think of it, to the other, that time in between, I find that really fascinating. And there's I think it's a Yale lecture course about the early Middle Ages. It's been a long time since I've listened to it, but that was really, really interesting. And I can leave a link in the description box if you also want to listen to it. I really enjoyed that. It's not very ASMR, so. Alright. And that's all the questions in a reasonable time, I think. If there's anything I missed or any other questions that have come up for you, just leave me a comment and I'll try to respond to them. And in the meantime, I just want to say thank you for your interest. Thank you for being such a kind community, such a positive and motivating community. I feel very blessed to have you all, and I really couldn't ask for a better experience here on YouTube. So thank you very, very much. But for now, I hope you've already drifted off to sleep, or if not, you can find some sleep now. See you again next week. Good night.